Hello, are you considering a move to Florida? I'm going to give you now 7 things you need to know prior to making that purchase of real estate here in the state of Florida. Hello, I'm Ryan Zachos. I'm broker owner of Zachos Realty and Design Group out of Sarasota, Florida. We have an office in downtown Sarasota and on Venice Island. And I've been doing real estate here in the area for about 8 years. I started the company with my father, who's a retired police officer with Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. And together we've had the opportunity to service and help hundreds of people in relocating here from out of state. I wanted to share some of that experience with you in this video and give you 7 things that you need to know prior to purchasing real estate here in Florida. Let's dive right in. Number 1, insurance costs. Obviously, with the recent hurricanes and storms that have hit the state of Florida, the cost of insurance has gone up. Insurance is something that you should consider prior to making that purchase and using that inspection period to actually get insurance quotes on your home. So there are a couple things that go into the cost of insurance: the proximity to the water, the age of the home, the age of the roof, the age of the components of the home, the water heater, the AC, plumbing, electrical, stuff like that goes into the cost of insuring the home. And then also something to consider as well in insurance is, are you in a flood zone? If you're in a flood zone, then insurance or flood insurance will be required if you are getting a loan on the property. That flood insurance cost will be determined by the elevation of the home, the proximity to the water, the value of the home, the elevation of the home, what flood zone you're in. Are you in AE or are you in A or in a different flood zone? All these things are important in determining the cost of that insurance, as well as it is a primary residence or a secondary residence. Is it going to be a rental? There's a lot of things that go into the cost of insurance, but that is something you have to consider. Because it used to be you could buy a home for under $2,000 a year, you can insure the property. That's not necessarily the case anymore. And also, there are some areas here in Florida where there might only be one insurer in that area. But for example, here at Venice Island, it's hard to get insurance that is not Citizens insurance. Citizens now is enacting something new where even if you're not in a flood zone, if you're in a high elevation area, they are still requiring flood insurance, and that's being rolled out over the next 4 years or so. That is something to consider for sure if you are looking to purchase here in Florida. Next thing is number 2 is new construction costs. So there is tons of pros in buying new construction, but there are additional costs associated with new construction oftentimes that you should consider. One, the closing costs are going to be higher on new construction. A lot of these builders are dumping fees that are normally paid for by the seller onto the buyer at closing. These closing costs are going to be higher than if you were to buy a resale. Also, with the amount of new construction over the last 5 years or so here in Florida, there has been some issues in the quality of construction on some communities and some builders here in the state of Florida. So you want to make sure that you do your due diligence in actually getting a home inspection or looking at that property thoroughly to make sure there are no issues. I've heard everything from mold, plumbing, some electrical issues, and even actually zoning or the easements or setbacks on the property have been issues with new construction here in Florida. So that's something that you should consider. So when buying new construction, make sure you have a good real estate agent and not just using the sales rep for the community, but actually use a real estate agent who has your best interest at heart, will help you get inspections, help you look at the property and have done this so that way they can guide and navigate you through that new construction buying process. Number 3, house materials and maintenance. This is a big thing here in the state of Florida. I'm sure it's the same in other states as well. But over the last 100 years of building homes in this area and in the state of Florida, there have been a lot of materials that have been banned or have been deemed as insufficient or even uninsurable at times. For example, 50 years ago, cloth wiring was prominent, and the best electricians in the area 50 years ago were using cloth wiring in the attics of these homes. This is now a fire hazard, and insurance companies hate cloth wiring. That's something to be aware of if you're buying an older home. Another thing is that prior to the 80s here in the state of Florida, cast iron was highly regarded. They thought of it as a very durable metal, but over the years now, there actually has been some decay, corrosion happening at cast iron. And even my first house I bought in Florida was cast iron piping. I didn't get it scoped prior to purchasing the property. This was years and years ago. The pipe actually corroded behind the kitchen sink, and then it led to a flood in the kitchen. One day I came home from work and the kitchen was flooded. So you want to definitely, if you're buying a home with cast iron, to make sure you do a scoping of that to make sure that there is no corrosion or decay there on the inside of cast iron. I could go on and on about all the different materials that were used over the years. One of the best plumbing materials that were used in water lines just 20 years ago was polybutylene piping. Obviously, we know now there was a class action lawsuit against polybutylene, and it is now outlawed, but a lot of these homes still have polybutylene. That is known to be insufficient, that it will leak over time. And that's just an example of just 20 years ago of something that we thought was a really good material and even top of the line material of it being outlawed. Oh, there's tons of different materials. And like I said, I can go on and on, even with like double taps in the electrical panel of things that were thought of as being completely fine and okay just 10 years ago are now, looked down upon because of what we know and understand about the material and how to construct homes. Again, make sure you hire a good realtor, a good home inspector that knows what they're looking for and the type of materials that were used in the construction of these homes. That's something to be made aware of. Number 3 is that the house materials and construction materials. Number 4, nature and natural disasters. As you know, when you're buying in Florida, you might incur some natural disasters. Things to consider: location of your actual home regarding flooding. Are you in a flood zone? What's your elevation of the home? What's the risk? Hurricanes, what's the storm surge capability for your area? Are you going to be at risk or not? Understand that risk. Red tide is another natural occurrence that happens here along the Gulf Coast of Florida. How does that affect your property? Obviously it can cause irritation of the eyes, throat. The smell can be awful at times, but what's that occurrence look like? Is it based on the wind, the water? Is your home going to be affected or is it not? Sinkholes is not an issue here in my area, but if you get to areas like Spring Hill, just north of Tampa there on the Gulf Coast, it's a huge issue. There are actually disclosures you have to sign regarding sinkholes. So that's, again, you want to be made aware of like what area you're buying, what are the natural disasters, the risks associated with that area that you're buying. Number 5, school zones. This is a big one because people think in their head, based on where they're relocating from, if they're relocating to a $2 million community or a $3 million community here in Sarasota or in Lakewood Ranch or whatever it may be, they just assume that school zone must be a really good school zone. Well, obviously, that may not be the case. You might be in a really high-end, really luxurious neighborhood community, even in a great area of town, but yet zoned for a school that is very low rated and not desirable. So there is school choice here, and that is always an option. The problem with that is you can't just bank on it because a lot of times the best schools in the area, the highest rated schools in the area do have a long wait list, and there's no guarantee you could be in those schools unless you are actually zoned for those schools. So there are a lot of private schools, there's a lot of charter schools, there's a lot of school options, even if you do end up in a not great school zoned area. But it is important to understand that can affect the resale value of property and to understand that going into the home purchase. Next, number 6, the proximity and location to amenities. I tell everyone that you are going to live your life in just a couple mile radius around your property. So yes, you might be buying in a neighborhood, you might be buying a specific home that you want, but are you buying in the actual location that you want to do life? I think that's so important in understanding where you want to live and how you want to live. But I tell everyone, go to the Publix or go to the grocery store that you're going to be shopping at if you buy that home. Go live a day over in that area of the community because ultimately that's where you're going to eat. That's where you're going to shop. That's where you're going to go grocery shopping. It's where you're going to go to Target or Walmart or whatever it is you do your retail. It's important to understand that you're going to enjoy living where you live and shopping where you shop and eating where you eat, whether it's takeout that you enjoy getting or dining out or going to find whether the amenities that you want to go, how close are you to the beach, how close are you to entertainment. All these things are so important. I've come across many people that thought they were buying in an area that they would love and enjoy just to know that okay, I'm 10 minutes to the closest grocery store, or the beach is a lot further than I thought it was. And so I think it's really important to actually go to that area or, definitely hire a realtor that you trust, that knows the area really well. I was born and raised here in Sarasota, Florida. So obviously I know the area really, really well, but, hire someone that knows the area and can guide you that this is where I want to be based on where I want to do life. That's super important. Number 7, condo living is the last one. Condo living, it is with this collapse of the condo in Surfside, Florida, just a couple of years ago. Florida's enacted a couple of different law changes that affect buying condos here in Florida. There is a new requirement that condo buildings and associations that have 3 or more stories are required to do a structural integrity reserve study every 10 years from the inception of that condo building, and it is required to be done effective immediately. So a lot of these condo associations and HOAs have now special assessments and higher condo dues in order to cover these studies done by engineering firms so that they can guarantee the structural integrity of these condo buildings. So that is something to be made aware of. There's a lot of people that are selling their units because they know that these assessments are going to happen or have taken place and they can't afford these massive assessments to the property. But that is something to be made aware of going forward, that these condo dues are likely to be raised. Also, again, we're going back to the insurance issues here in Florida, that with the cost of insurance now, insurance is raised. So therefore the condo dues are having to raise, or special assessments incurred because of the cost of insurance. So just know that even though you might be buying a condo at $500 a month in condo dues, HOA fees, that might not be what actually it entails long term. It could very much go up, especially with these new laws that Florida is enacting. So that's it for this video. There are obviously many things I could have covered. I could have went into great detail in every one of those categories. That's a little bit of a snippet. But if you want more information regarding some of these, or have any questions regarding some of these topics, please feel free to reach out. I would love to be a resource for you. Thanks, and talk to you soon.